Please rise to the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Route of egress. In the event of an emergency, all people may exit right or left from this room and proceed to an exit door. All doors will open from the inside. The Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Haledon Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published in the North Jersey Herald News, the board's official newspaper, on January 13th, 2021. On January 15th, 2021, notice of this virtual meeting was also made. Notices of this meeting indicating date, time, and place were posted publicly on the door of the main entrance of the school and filed with the clerk in the municipality of Haledon. Roll call, please.
Ms. Diaz. Mrs. Isa.
Here.
Mr. Jacquez.
Here.
Mr. Martinez.
Here.
Mr. Moxo.
Here.
Mrs. Perez.
Here.
Mr. Webb.
Here.
Mr. Zlatanovic.
Here.
And Mr. Guzman.
Here. Seeing no presentation, seeing no correspondence, do we have a motion to approve prior minutes?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mr. Martinez. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Isa. Mr. Jacquez.
Yes.
Mr. Martinez. Mr. Moxo.
Yes.
Mrs. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic.
Yes.
And Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to open up the public portion to hear citizens on the agenda items only?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mrs. Perez, and roll call.
Mrs. Isa.
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez.
Yes.
Mr. Martinez. Mr. Moxo.
Yes.
Mrs. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Mr. Zlatan.
Yes.
Yes. At this time, the floor is now open for any citizens who wish to address the Board of Education on agenda items only. Do we have a motion to close?
So move.
Second.
And roll call, please.
Mrs. Isa.
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez.
Yes.
Mr. Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. Moxo.
Yes.
Mrs. Perez.
Yes.
Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Mr. Zlatanovic.
Yes.
And Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Moving on to committee reports. I'll start by saying that early in the week, Haledon Mayor Dominic Stampone reported that Haledon has passed a threshold of over 1,000 cases of COVID-19. We've also lost 25 Haledon residents due to COVID-19, and we send our deepest thoughts and condolences to everyone affected by the pandemic. I remain proud of our school district, how we've been able to persevere and remain open during the majority of this school year. I know last week, in the last 2 weeks, if not a little bit more, we've been dealing with a lot of snow. I want to thank the custodial staff and the administration for making sure that our campus was clean and as much as possible. It was very important because our school campus was used for residents to park. In addition, obviously, we need to make room for parking for our teachers and other staff members as well. So I want to thank them. I know last minute, um, as you know, we're very dedicated to remaining open for our parents and our students. And last minute, we had to close last week, so a notice went out at 6 in the morning. And I would just tell the community that I know that Mr. Waka has pretty much spoiled our community and being very timely and giving everyone a lot of notice, which is not always very common from superintendents. But unfortunately, things do happen, and we had a tough time fully staffing our school. So at 6 something in the morning, Mr. Waka recommended a decision to go remote only, and some parents were affected, meaning that they were planning on bringing their kids to school, and they had to make a last minute decision. But I ask that the community bear with us because we're doing the best we can. It is my understanding that the Hilden Public School has been the school that's been open the most, especially as far as curriculum time. Entire Passaic County, we've been open the most this school year. So that's a testament to our school district, to our teachers, and especially to our administration. So I just want to thank everyone for that. And I just want the community to know that we're doing everything we can to remain open, to make sure that our students are getting the best education possible, to ensure that our students are not staying at home alone, to ensure that our students are not staying home with perhaps maybe a grandparent that is not computer savvy, and as such affecting their education. So I want everyone to be aware of that, and I want to thank our entire school district for their full cooperation and understanding. Thank you very much. At this time, I'll turn it over to our Chief School Administrator, our Superintendent, our Building Principal, Mr. Chris Walker.
Thank you, Board President Guzman. I want to start by thanking our custodial team for their hard work these past few weeks. We've definitely had a rough few weeks with the weather, but every single member of our custodial team has stepped up to keep our grounds safe, and to every day kind of create more and more parking. So I appreciate Bill and all his work. And it's hard not to think of Corrado every time it snows or the weather gets bad. And I'm really proud of the efforts that everyone's made to kind of make up for that terrible loss. I want to touch upon what President Guzman had mentioned before. When it can be helped, I think it's the right thing to do to give the community as much notice as possible when we're going to go remote or if there's a snow day. I'm also a father, and I know what it's like at 6 in the morning to have to scramble to find childcare options for your kid when you expected that morning for your kid to be in school. But sometimes the weather is what it is. I know the roads around here weren't terrible, but not everyone, lives around here. We had about 30 staff that weren't able to make it in that morning. And at that point, combined with the staff that are either on some kind of leave, combined with the staff that may be on a quarantine or something like that, we just weren't able to facilitate, in-person learning that day. But also to kind of touch on what the board president said is that the proof's in the pudding. We've, done as much as anyone, if not more than anyone, to get these as many in-service hours as possible. We don't look at remote instruction as being a crutch that we're going to rely on. When possible, we want to go in person. We've been able to be very successful with that. And when we can't do that, we have the remote option as well. Next thing I want to talk about is our priority skill enrichment program. We currently have about 170 students set to begin that next week, which is a great number, especially for a brand new program. I'm going to report in the next couple of days to the community what specific skills will be focused on at each grade level. We got some kids coming on a Tuesday night, some kids Thursday, some kids Saturday morning, some kids coming multiple days. But the staff have done a really good job kind of collaborating as far as what skills they want. I appreciate their work. The assistant principals are helping organize that as well. And for the 170 parents that signed up their kids for, extra school, I want to say thank you. I think it's going to be an exciting program, and I'm looking forward to launching it. Next, John, our business administrator, will talk in greater detail about this. But we found out on Friday afternoon that in the second round of federal COVID, money from the federal government, we're going to receive, it looks over $1.6 million, which is wonderful news. I'm sure John will kind of get into more details about what we anticipate the allowable uses will be. In the past, what we've done is kind of go to all our stakeholder groups and say, what's your wish list or what do you need in order to be able to facilitate the building safely? What technology do you need, things like that. And we kind of make a wish list based on that. And with the first round of COVID money, we were able to use the money so that we've created an environment where so far we're almost in March and the virus has not been able to spread within our school building. So we've been very efficient and effective with our use of the money. We'll look to do the same thing with the same kind of priorities moving forward, but it's great news that we have this much money to use for next year. Earlier in the week, Mr. Torito and myself and Board President Guzman met with the CEO of Certified Angels, Jessica De La Cruz. Certified Angels is an after-school program, and they provide scheduled activities that encourage creativity and self-awareness and physical activities through the arts. These activities also include dance and performing arts, photography and sports and mentoring and community service. We were impressed with the presentation that we got. We've been invited to visit the Certified Angels program once the visitor restrictions are lifted. It's our hope that after further exploration, we may infuse some or all of these programs into our currently established aftercare program. This would likely include adopting a recognized curriculum, hiring staff to coordinate these activities, and providing professional development to our current staff to work in conjunction with some of the best practices demonstrated by the Certified Angels program. We are fairly confident that we'll be able to make this optional offering to our students at a reasonable cost, so it will not put an undue burden on families. But, I think the three of us left that meeting with a very positive vibe. And this summer, I'm looking forward to learning more about that program. And lastly, our governor is set to petition the federal government to waive state testing. I think that's a smart idea. Currently, the plan to test students statewide has been put on hold. Now, if we're told that we need to administer tests, we are ready to do so and we're prepared to do so. But if we're not required to provide state assessments, then our district will look to make some kind of in-house baseline assessment, a scaled down version, just so we can have some relevant data as far as where our students are at. But I'm hopeful that the federal government will allow us to waive state testing this year. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Our business administrator, Mr. Piglio.
Good evening. I also want to echo the board president and our superintendent in thanking our custodians for doing a yeoman's job for getting this building, really clearing out the area to get this building used each and every day. We've had record snowfalls and they've been just absolutely fantastic with it. On the agenda tonight, we have a couple of resolutions that I wanted to touch on. We have two policies that we're looking to approve as a first reading. This is actually policies that are going to be allowing us to ascertain points for Sustainable New Jersey for certification. We're asking for you to approve that. We're also looking at amending our current allocation of CARES money. This is to reflect purchasing that has been made, particularly in the area of custodial supplies. So we're looking at amending our CARES grant allocation. As mentioned, we did receive ESSER funding, or a notification of ESSER funding of our allocation of $1.674 million. Which is going to tie into the next part that I wanted to speak about, which is a budget update. Today was the budget address from the governor. The state aid numbers should be released either tomorrow or at the latest, I believe, by Thursday. The governor did mention that he was looking at increasing state aid for the schools. When you guys sat down today, you saw a rough draft of the budget. Again, this was, I had hoped to give out a budget book tonight, but really with all the changes that are going to be happening, I thought it would be prudent to first kind of get some clarification. As Mr. Walker had mentioned, we did get $1.674 million. And I mean, we're very, grateful for that money. I can't see us spending 1.674 million strictly on CARES type reopening school type expenditures. We've already spent a significant portion of CARES money on that. We still have money left in those accounts, and certainly there are certain costs that we're going to be above and beyond our normal budgeting that we are certainly going to tap that into that money. But the other important part about the ESSER 2 funding, and it's right on the website in terms of allowable uses, at the very end, it speaks about other activities that are necessary to maintain the operation of and continuity of services and local educational agencies and continuing to employ existing staff of the local educational agency. So I'm not sure if this can actually be utilized to supplement state aid. It seems like it can be. So again, we're sort of, we're reaching out to the county offices to get clarification. I'm sure they're waiting on clarification from Trenton in regards to allowable uses of this. I mean, it's not a great time. I mean, it's, while anytime you're getting money is great, the timing of this is a little bit tough because, and as I spoke about in finance, the information I gave to you is pretty much going to be the expenditures that the board will be looking to make, or at least the administration is recommending to be made in the 21-22 school year. However, it might be that we're moving those costs around based on where the funding is coming from. For instance, this ESSER 2 funding would be coming out of Fund 20. It would be a different revenue source than we currently have within the budget. So it might be that expenditures that are in the current budget would be moved into there. Something else I wanted to mention in regards to the expenditures, a county meeting that I had last week while we were putting together this budget and the documentation that you have in front of you was we were told that capital projects are really on a slow track for being approved. That's due to in part to the fact that there aren't people down in Trenton. So again, it might be that the overall expenditures aren't going to change, but where the items are being charged to could be. The capital projects list that you have in front of you right now includes the the HVAC project for this gymnasium. We initially had looked at doing it in the 2021 budget, but given the time frame, given the delays on the possible approval, it was, in discussing it with the architect, we decided to put it in the 21-22 budget. So while we do have the money in the 2021 budget year, we're going to be looking to basically roll it over into the 21-22 budget. However, if there is any potential for delays with approval of that project, the county actually suggested that rather than fund it out of Fund 12, moving it to Fund 30, which is really, an accounting maneuver. But the key about that is that if you fund it out of Fund 30, it allows the project to stretch out into over 1 year. Fund 30 project can be paid out over 2 or 3 years. So again, the expenditures that are listed there are going to be the projects and the costs that we're going to be looking to incur, but it might be changed around. Furthermore, because the state is taking so long on approving some of the projects, it might be that 2 of the big projects that we're looking at doing, which was renovation of the library and renovation of science rooms, could be moved into the Fund 11 because a lot of that project is purchasing furniture and the like. So because it's furniture, we can also look at moving it into basically a supply line and basically bumping up our regular costs of operations. So, there's a lot of moving parts here. But again, I wanted the board to have an idea of the expenditures that we are looking to have. We will be having a budget book. I believe Lois has reached out to some of you to figure out if you want a hard copy or a digital copy. But regardless of where we wind up in terms of where we're charging everything, the budget that you have in front of you, if we didn't get this ESSER money, if we didn't get even increase in state aid, we would still be able to to fund this budget. And furthermore, we would be able to fund this budget with a 0% tax increase. We are conscious of what's going on both in the state and in the community in regards to the pandemic. We are also conscious of the fact that if we could potentially cut taxes, we would look to be doing that. However, last year we were at the lowest allowable tax rate. We weren't able to reduce taxes in the 2021 school year. We might not be able to do that in the 21-22 school year. Again, this information hasn't been released yet. Once we do have that information as terms of what the minimum taxes will be, we will certainly look to bring the district to that number. So that's where we're at right now with the budget. Again, I hope to have more clarification, especially in regards to the ESSER 2 funding, because again, that could be money that could be used to, at least the way that I read it, to be used to support expenditures in the 22-20, or rather the 21-22 school year. One final note is the BA subcommittee, which is going to be meeting with its counterpart for Manchester for the shared service, for any potential revisions to that shared service contract, is scheduled to meet next week on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. It's a Zoom meeting. For those who are members of that committee, you'll be getting an email tomorrow with all of the login information. And I will be sending out copies of the shared service agreement. And I'm also going to pull the revisions that we did last time to the superintendent contract. So you have a point of reference as to some of the changes that Manchester and Haledon had agreed to with the superintendent contract when that was discussed between two committees, which I think was only like a year or two ago. So again, you'll have all of that information so that everybody's well prepared for that meeting next Tuesday. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. BA. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Serapiglia, for that money, this second round of federal funding that we're getting, since you're thinking that we probably wouldn't spend all of that on COVID-related expenses, is it a possibility to spend some of that money or use some of that money or earmark it for new space? Space has been such an issue for the past few years, and I'm wondering if it could be used towards like a new breaking ground or a new facility or a new property. Is that possible?
It doesn't seem like it could be used for that. However, it could be that the money is used to supplant other costs, so that money is freed up in the current operating budget for a potential deposit into the capital reserve, for instance, so that the district could save up money through a capital reserve account to, because again, in terms of breaking ground, we would be looking at probably a couple of $1 million to do something like that. But we could certainly look at doing something like that with the capital reserve. But while I don't think we could just use this money strictly for that sort of expenditure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll definitely be talking more about that. Personnel and management, Mr. Perez.
We had a brief meeting before this meeting. We just discussed a new hire and agenda items.
Thank you. Finance and physical plan, Mr. Moxo.
We met today, we signed bills. Like Mr. Sirpin said, we discussed the draft budget. It's gonna finalize. And other than that, just the agenda items.
Thank you. Curriculum and technology, Mrs. Issa.
Agenda items only.
Policy, Mr. Martinez. Security and safety, Mr. Slantanovic.
Hi, we don't have much of an update since our last meeting. I just want to, I know you touched on that about the COVID numbers. So we have a little over 1,000 residents in Haledon since the beginning of the pandemic who've tested positive, and 25 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. So
Correct.
I just want to clarify that. The county, you know, the borough itself has a partnership with the county health department. So I definitely urge everyone to visit the county health department's website for information related to in-person testing as well as at-home testing kits that are free, and also information about the vaccine sites. The county runs a vaccine site at the old Modell's sports store on Route 46 in Woodland Park, so it's easy to get to. Yeah, like the board president pointed out, we've done a pretty good job in the district, I think, of avoiding some of the school outbreaks that we've seen in other districts. I think the county, it's in Passaic County, there's been about 6 or 7 school outbreaks. Statewide, I think statewide, there's been over 150 school outbreaks and over 700 cases linked to that. So I really applaud the administration's mitigation measures that are in place. One other thing I just want to add, this is something that's in the pipeline. I know that tomorrow the Assembly Education Committee is going to have a hearing, and one of the bills that they're going to consider is revising provisions required in a school district's anti-bullying policy, and it may be providing civil liability for parents of minors adjudicated delinquent. So that's something I'm sure that if it passes the legislature, you know, we'll learn more about it through the, you know, through the administration. So I have nothing else to report.
I just have a quick question, Vic. How are we making out, how's the state making out with the next phase as far as teachers and school personnel?
As to COVID?
As to vaccines.
Oh, as to the vaccines. Let me just take a look at this real quick. I mean, I think it's been kind of a rough rollout. Notwithstanding the winter, the state itself has to rely on the federal government to get those vaccines. And so sometimes when there's a hiccup in the supply chain, it'll have downstream effects on counties and municipalities. So the county itself might not always have enough doses. And that's why sometimes when people try to register for a vaccination, it might show that the registration is closed. And they run their vaccine sites based on supply of doses. Obviously, if there's no vaccines, the county is not able to vaccinate. There are plans with the new federal administration to push these vaccines out directly to the pharmacies. So that might change things. Also, this week, the federal government's considering approving Johnson & Johnson's new vaccine. So in contrast to Moderna's and Pfizer's, which are 2-dose vaccines, J&J's is only a 1-dose vaccine. And it looks like it's pretty, I mean, there's a lot of good news. I think at this point, I think nationwide is about 6% of people who've gotten the 2-dose vaccines. And that number, you know, continues to grow. In New Jersey, it's a little over 1.7 million total vaccines that have been administered, 500,000 people who've gotten both doses that they needed. So, I mean, it's a slow rollout, but I think especially once J&J gets their vaccine approved, we might see a pickup in new vaccinations.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Community engagement, Mrs. Perez.
Nothing to report at this time.
Stain County, Mrs. Isa.
Nothing to report.
Okay, moving on. Personnel management.
I'd like to move agenda items 7.1 to 7.5.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Perez, second by Mr. Moxo, and roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Curriculum and technology.
I'd like to move item 8.1.
So move. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Isa, second by Mr. Moxo. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Policy. Do you have,
Move item 191, 92. More than-
like to move 9.1 and 9.2, Mr. Martinez? Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Martinez, second by Mr. Moxo, and roll call.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez, Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Finance and physical plant.
Like to move item 12.1 to 12.12.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mrs. Lantanovic, and a roll call.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Any new or old business? Okay. Do we have a motion to open up the public portion to hear citizens who wish to address the Board of Education?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mrs. Perez, and a roll call.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Webb, Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. At this time, the floor is now open to any citizens who wish to address the Board of Education. Seeing none, do we have a motion to close?
Move.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Perez, second by Mr. Jacquez, and roll call.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez, Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Moxo, second by Mr. Martinez. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Isa,
Yes.
Mr. Jacquez,
Yes.
Mr. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Moxo,
Yes.
Mrs. Perez,
Yes.
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mrs. Zlatanovic,
Yes.
and Mr. Guzman.
Yes. Good night, everyone. Be safe.
Good night.
All right.